You won't believe what happened inside this small martial arts dojo last weekend. Picture this: a group of students warming up, instructors preparing for a routine day of training, and then an elderly woman walks in. At first glance, she didn't look like she belonged there. Gray hair tied back, walking slowly with a slight limp, wearing a loose sweater and track pants. Definitely not your usual black belt challenger. The room went silent, whispers started, a few chuckles broke out, and then one of the younger black belts couldn't hold back his laughter. Is she here to sign up her grandson? He joked, loud enough for everyone to hear. But what happened next shocked everyone in the room. She didn't get angry. She didn't walk out. She simply smiled, that calm, confident kind of smile that tells you something's about to go down. She asked if she could spar. The instructors looked at each other, a little confused, maybe even concerned, but they agreed. The same black belt who laughed volunteered, thinking it would be an easy win, maybe just a friendly demonstration. Cameras started rolling. People gathered around, expecting a harmless show. What they got was something no one expected. In less than 10 seconds, and we're talking real time, not some movie-style editing, the old lady moved like lightning. 1 second they were standing face to face. The next, the black belt was on the ground, dazed, looking up in complete disbelief. No one laughed after that. Who was she? Where did she learn to move like that? And why did she walk into that dojo on that particular day? This isn't just a story about skill. It's about judgment, humility, and the hidden stories behind the people we overlook. Stick around, because what you're about to see next will not only surprise you, it might just change the way you look at people forever. Nobody in that room had ever seen anything like it. The black belt, a young, confident guy named Jason, had been training for over 6 years. He wasn't just skilled, he was known for his speed, strength, and sharp technique. Yet here he was, flat on the mat, rubbing his shoulder, looking completely stunned. The old lady, still calm and collected, simply stepped back and bowed slightly. No celebration, no gloating, just grace. People started whispering again, but this time it wasn't laughter, it was shock. One of the instructors stepped forward and gently asked her name. "Margaret," she said softly. No last name, no explanations, just Margaret. When asked where she learned to move like that, she smiled again and replied, "It's been a while, but some things stay with you." That only added to the mystery. What kind of training leaves that deep a mark? And why hadn't anyone heard of her before? A few students pulled out their phones and tried searching online. Nothing came up. No recent tournament records, no viral clips, nothing. It was like she didn't exist in the martial arts world. But from the way she moved, it was clear this wasn't just luck or a lucky strike. Her timing, balance, and precision showed years of training, maybe even decades. But why now? Why walk into that specific dojo, challenge someone unprovoked, and leave everyone speechless? Jason, still catching his breath, wasn't angry. He was confused. "What just happened?" he kept asking. And honestly, no one had an answer. Margaret, though, looked completely at peace, like she had expected all of this to happen. One of the older instructors stared at her closely, then finally said, "I think I've seen her before. A long time ago." But before anyone could press further, Margaret quietly walked over to the corner, picked up her jacket, and sat down like nothing had happened. Something deeper was going on here. This wasn't just about martial arts. There was history in that room, something unspoken, and everyone there felt it. A strange tension, a sense that the story was only just beginning. As Margaret sat quietly in the corner, the room stayed strangely silent. The usual noise of practice, gloves hitting pads, shouts of effort, trainers calling out drills, was gone. Everyone was watching her, not sure what to do next. Jason stood up slowly, still shaken, but not hurt. He looked over at the instructors, waiting for some sort of explanation, but they looked just as puzzled as he was. Then Sensei Mark, one of the oldest teachers in the dojo, finally spoke up. "I think she's the one from the old stories," he said, mostly to himself, but loud enough for others to hear. People turned toward him. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a woman who used to dominate underground tournaments. She didn't go by her real name, but everyone knew her. Fast, technical, unbeatable. Then one day she just vanished. His eyes were fixed on Margaret. No one ever saw her again. Jason raised an eyebrow. So you think that's her? Mark didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to Margaret and asked, "Is that true? Were you part of those old circuits?" Margaret just gave a quiet laugh and said, "Some things are better left in the past." That only raised more questions. Word started to spread. Students messaged friends. People began showing up at the dojo's windows, peeking in, trying to catch a glimpse of this mystery woman. A local martial arts blogger even showed up with a camera, hoping for a quick interview. Margaret politely declined, saying she wasn't here for attention, but the curiosity only grew stronger. Meanwhile, Jason wasn't the only one dealing with his pride. Some of the senior students started questioning what they really knew about martial arts. If someone like Margaret could walk in and shake the entire room without breaking a sweat, what else were they missing? One student, Lena, began digging into old tournament archives, hoping to find a trace of Margaret's past. Another, Chris, started wondering if this was all part of a lesson, maybe arranged by the instructors to teach humility. But no one could prove anything. Something had shifted in the dojo. Respect, ego, curiosity, it was all tangled up now. And Margaret, with her calm silence, seemed to know exactly what she was doing. Over the next few days, the dojo felt different. The usual routine was there, warm-ups, sparring drills, belt tests, but something unspoken lingered in the air. Margaret came back the following evening, just as quietly as before, slipping into the corner again with that same calm presence. She didn't ask to spar. She didn't speak much, but everyone noticed her. Some watched her closely, hoping she'd reveal another move. Others kept their distance, unsure how to act around someone who'd flipped the entire dojo's dynamic in 10 seconds. Jason, meanwhile, couldn't shake the feeling. He'd gone over the footage frame by frame, trying to figure out how she moved so fast, how she read his body like a book. It wasn't strength, he told Sensei Mark. It was something else, like, she already knew what I was going to do. That thought haunted him. Was she just that good? Or had he become too predictable? Sensei Mark, for the first time in years, started practicing harder himself. He pulled out old manuals, drills he hadn't taught in a decade, and began revisiting things he thought he'd already mastered. Margaret had awakened something in him too, not fear, but challenge, and maybe even guilt. Because if she was the same fighter from the past, then there was more to her story, and he might have been part of it. Lena, the student researching Margaret's background, finally found something strange. A blurry photo from an old underground match in 1991. A woman in a black jai, arm raised in victory. The face wasn't clear, but the posture, calm, collected, unbothered, was unmistakable. And next to her in the background, a younger Mark, barely in his 20s, looking right at the camera. Lena brought it to him. "This is her, isn't it?" He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. Then came the turning point. Margaret asked to lead a warm-up. Not a spar, just a warm-up. Everyone expected something light. Instead, what followed was the most precise, challenging flow of movements anyone had ever experienced. Breathing, balance, control, all taken to another level. The class ended in silence. Then she turned to Mark. "It's time," she said. Nobody knew what she meant, but they all felt it. Something was coming. When Margaret said, "It's time," the whole room froze. Even Sensei Mark, usually steady and unreadable, looked shaken. He stared at her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod, like a man who had just been handed something he hoped would never come back. Without another word, Margaret turned and walked out, leaving everyone confused and more curious than ever. That night, Mark stayed late after the dojo closed. Jason, still trying to make sense of everything, came back to ask more questions. "Who is she to you?" he asked. Mark didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a locked cabinet no one had seen him touch before. Inside was an old binder, worn at the edges, filled with photos, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. At the center of it all was a black and white photo, a much younger Margaret standing beside a small tournament ring. But what caught Jason off guard wasn't her, it was the person standing next to her. It was Mark. Not just as a spectator, but in full fighting gear. "We were partners," Mark finally said, "not just in training. We built something underground, something that went too far." He didn't say what happened. Not yet. But Jason could tell there was pain behind his eyes. Guilt. Maybe regret. Then came the twist no one saw coming. The next morning, a flyer appeared on the bulletin board outside the dojo. It wasn't from the school. It had no name, just a symbol, an old martial arts crest almost no one recognized, and a single line of text. "One night only. Invitation only. Settle what was left unfinished." Underneath, taped to the bottom, were 3 names: Margaret, Mark, and a third no one recognized: Dago. Whispers spread fast. Was it a challenge? A rematch? A secret tournament? Some of the older students remembered that name. Daigo wasn't just a fighter. He was a legend, the kind people only talked about in rumors. Stories about brutal matches, rivalries, and one fight that ended a career. Some said he disappeared after crossing a line. And if his name was back, it meant unfinished business. Now everything made sense. The tension, Margaret's return, Mark's hesitation. But nobody knew what was really at stake. And Margaret hadn't even started explaining her side. The dojo felt like a pressure cooker as the day of the secret match arrived. Only a handful of people were invited: senior students, a few trusted instructors, and those who had been there when Margaret first stepped onto the mat. The event wasn't public, but the air buzzed like something historic was about to happen. Jason stood by the edge of the mat, heart racing. He didn't fully understand everything, but he knew this wasn't just about fighting. It was about something deeper, something personal. Margaret showed up early, dressed in a plain black gi, calm as ever. Mark came soon after, quieter than usual, tension written all over his face. And then, just as the lights dimmed and the crowd hushed, the doors opened and a tall figure stepped inside. Dago. Older than the stories made him seem, but still strong, eyes sharp as steel. The room stiffened. Even Margaret's expression shifted for a moment. Not fear, but a kind of focused respect. No introductions, no music, just 3 people standing in a triangle on the mat. Then Mark stepped forward. "We were supposed to end this a long time ago," he said, voice low. "But I ran, and she disappeared. And you—" He looked at Dago, kept fighting like the war never ended. Dago just smirked. Because it didn't. The match began with Margaret and Dago circling each other. Their movements were almost too fast to follow. Years of experience boiled into every step, every strike, every breath. Margaret was fluid, surgical. Dago was brutal, powerful, relentless. Mark stepped in only once, trying to break the rhythm, but the moment he did, Dago hit him with a strike that dropped him to one knee. Jason and the others moved to step in, but Margaret raised her hand. "Let it finish," she said. And then, in a blur of motion, she disarmed Dago mid-strike, twisted him into a submission hold so fast it felt unreal, and whispered something in his ear. Dago froze. His expression changed, from rage to something almost like remorse. And then, he tapped out. The room stayed silent, but as Dago stood up and bowed to her, Jason noticed something strange. Margaret was shaking, not from fear or exhaustion, but from pain. Quiet, hidden pain. Later, after everyone had left, Jason found Margaret sitting alone, holding her side. "Why did you really come back?" he asked. She looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "To finish something, before my body finishes me." And just like that, she stood, walked out into the night, and disappeared, again. No one's seen her since. In the days that followed, the dojo slowly returned to normal, at least on the surface. But something had shifted. The students trained with more focus, more intention. they weren't just learning kicks and punches anymore. They were learning awareness, humility, and the weight of what martial arts truly means. Jason, who had once been all ego and speed, now approached each session with quiet respect. He wasn't chasing belts anymore. He was chasing understanding. Sensei Mark finally opened up to the class. He shared the truth about the underground scene, how he, Margaret, and Dago were once close, united by a passion that turned competitive and dangerous. A match between Dago and Margaret years ago had ended with a serious injury, and the fallout broke them apart. Mark had blamed himself for not stopping it. Margaret vanished to heal, physically and emotionally. Dago never stopped fighting, always searching for a rematch. That flyer on the board? It wasn't just an invitation, it was a final test. Lena, the student who had found the old photo, published a thoughtful blog about the entire event. She never revealed names, only lessons, about respecting experience, not judging by appearance, and the quiet strength that some people carry with them even when they say nothing at all. The story caught fire in local martial arts circles, spreading the legend of the mysterious woman who schooled a black belt in 10 seconds and then walked away without a trace. No one saw Margaret again. Her name was never found in any registry, but her presence lingered like a lesson burned into the floor of the dojo. She had come not for glory, but for closure, and maybe to remind the next generation that martial arts isn't just about power or speed, it's about timing, control, respect, and above all, purpose. Jason still keeps the old flyer in his locker, not as a trophy, but as a reminder, because sometimes the greatest masters don't need recognition or titles. Sometimes they just need 10 seconds to change everything.